Hi, sorry I can't be there in person today to help you with your standardisation for customer service practitioner. Um, Obviously, circumstances are a bit strange this year. However, I have put this slide deck together which runs through the key areas that the lead independent assessors have found this year. So I do hope you find it useful. So just to start off with, I thought we'd look at recent results from August 2019, June 2020. You can see there that we've had 15% that actually failed first time, 35% have passed or achieved a pass grade overall, and then 50%, which is really quite good, have achieved distinction or above. So we're going to start off with feedback from the lead independent assessors regarding Apprentice Showcase with the interview that's now attached. The apprentices and providers have essentially responded well to the new assessment that was introduced in December 2019, so that's the incorporation of the interview. It's provided apprentices really with the opportunity to further evidence how they've met those KSPs and basically given them an opportunity to add depth and breadth to their evidence, which has already possibly been presented, or actually which is new evidence that's come to light. So it's really been a positive. In some instances, the showcase has successfully been presented as a report, which is great, and that's had supporting appendices, which has got work-based evidence inside. Effective use has also been made of the alternative format of the recorded audio supported by a presentation, which is good to see. And in some cases, quite a lot of cases actually, a variety of assessment methods have been used, which really helps the apprentice mapping that evidence across the KSPs. Those methods might have been witness testimonies, reflective accounts, observations, work products that have captured real work-based examples, and these have often been submitted as appendices to the actual written report, which often results in very efficient and effective showcase portfolios which easily demonstrate the KSPs required. So moving on to the observation now. In most cases, apprentices have been able to demonstrate the KSPs associated to the practical observation. Face-to-face and non-facing customer service roles have been observed, and they've really generally met the required standard of communication and interpersonal skills, which is good. The positive customer engagement and the ability to recognise customer expectations have regularly been a feature of the EPA conducted. Witness testimony dispensation, due to that COVID-19 pandemic, the EPAs for the customer service practitioner standard were postponed or put on hold from March 2020. To ensure that continuity for apprentices currently on the CSP, we made the application to Ofqual and IFA for that witness testimony dispensation, and that component that requires, that face-to-face observation was now replaced by that witness testimony. That was granted in May, and they agreed the revised assessment method to replace that observation, and that's now up and running, obviously. The witness testimony to confirm competency, which will be completed by the apprentice's employer or a suitable witness, is now being used. That witness testimony can be in audio or in written format, whichever is easiest. It would be supported by a witness testimony Q&A, which would be conducted by the independent assessor with the apprentice, obviously based on the LIEPAs assessment of the employer's witness testimony. We've seen some good examples of the quality of those witness testimony early on, and they've easily met the standards. The examples have also been successfully mapped holistically across the standard and have basically attested to both the pass and distinction criteria, so across the board, which is good. Apprentices have generally been well prepared for that witness testimony Q&A and are familiar with the examples, so it's clear that centres have prepared them accordingly. The witness testimony recording form has been completed correctly, with the witness stating their name, job title and position, and not forgetting that relationship to the apprentice, as well as signing and dating the recording form. Generally that's been good, however, where it's been missed off, that's where it's caused issues. So moving on to the PD, overall apprentices have performed well during their PD. They've been able to eloquently and confidently discuss their job roles and responsibilities and describe their own and their organisation's customers, which is great. Apprentices have also been able to explain the importance of building that good customer relationship and of course the specific needs of their customers, and appropriate work-based examples from their experience have been provided which supports their knowledge and understanding. Those apprentices who have undertaken the PD remotely since that dispensation was put in place, they've basically adapted very well to the remote assessment methods, which means that there's clear evidence that they have been doing the mock remote assessments prior to the actual endpoint assessment. So moving on now to areas of development, which is a key area really to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes. So many portfolios are not focusing on the showcase criteria, so the KSBs associated to the showcase, but what they are doing is covering other areas such as well, the other assessment methods, so observation, discussion, etc. So the KSBs associated to that are also being put into the showcase, which isn't right. It also means that if that's the case, the apprentice gets confused as to what's linked to the showcase, and then when they are carrying out the PD, they can no longer have their showcase with them because it's got evidence that might give them an advantage, so we need to remember that. Some portfolios also, which have been submitted, still contain those confidential customer information. So we need to make sure that the learners are redacting any information that could breach GDPR, for instance. Whilst our systems are secure, apprentices should be clear really that if they do submit customer information, there's a potential breach there. Evidence submitted as part of the apprentice showcase can't often be opened by the LIEPAs. So it might be that the apprentice is putting links to, say, an e-portfolio which is broken, or links to internal systems that don't open. Quite often the pieces of evidence that have been submitted are not compatible with common software applications. So for instance, they've not been done in, say, PowerPoint or Office or Prezi, or they're not PDFs, for instance. The IEPAs have really struggled to open those documents. Where people have used task manuals and workbooks, these have been submitted as evidence. That's acceptable, that's absolutely fine. However, we are finding that on occasion they have been poorly completed, so insufficient evidence of the apprentice's knowledge and understanding of those topics. And what we have seen is that some that have been submitted just generally do not meet the required standards, the KSBs. So any evidence that goes forward into the showcase must be associated to the KSBs within the showcase and not any that are mapped across the PDs and observations. So making sure then that the evidence submitted within that showcase portfolio is only linked to the KSBs, which is linked to that portfolio, and not any to the others, not linked to any of the other assessment methods. Sorry, get my words out properly. We've also got to remember that now there must be a personal development plan. That one of those has got to be present within the portfolio. In the absence of a PDP, that component of the EPA can't be achieved. So it's really important that they're making sure that the PDP is in there. Evidence of applying a technique of, say, self-analysis, such as a SWOT or a PDP plan, must be submitted as part of the developing self area. We are still seeing showcase portfolios that don't have that evidence included, and as a result have achieved a fail grade despite all the other pass criteria being met. Apprentices are often not revisiting their showcase in prep for the endpoint assessment. This is really quite evident during the showcase interview, where they're often not able to recall specific work-based examples, or they're not able to find it within their copy of the showcase which is sat in front of them. If that's the case, it's obviously wasting time within that interview, relevant time, and obviously they're not meeting the pass criteria, so it's becoming a bit of a disadvantage. Make sure then that the apprentice is fully aware of their showcase portfolio prior to the interview. Apprentice showcases are not submitted in a timely manner resulting in that EPA date being rescheduled to allow sufficient time for the evidence to be assessed first, to be looked at in line with what the IEPA needs, the time that the IEPA needs to look at prior to doing the endpoint assessment. And finally, it's evident that apprentices' final showcase portfolios are not always subject to those quality checks. So there should be a rigorous quality assurance process in place really before you've uploaded it and submitted it to the ePub. So moving on now to the witness testimonies, which is supported by the Q&A as an area of development. What we've seen is witness testimonies have a lack of specific work-based examples and often contain insufficient generic statements. So making sure that the evidence that's going forward are specific work-based examples. And the key areas which lack work-based examples are adapting to different customers and their needs, upholds the core values and service culture of the organisation, willingness to work with others and share ideas where appropriate, remaining positive and professional when circumstances are challenging, and taking ownership from the beginning to the end. So please make sure that when you're using a witness testimony as the dispensation, the work-based examples do cover those key areas, because those are the areas that we are finding learners are struggling with. Sticking with the witness testimony, some basic information really, but making sure that the witness testimony form is signed and to make sure that the relationship of the person who actually did the witness testimony and what their relationship is to the apprentice is clear. So make sure that that happens. We are seeing that often being missed out in the form. Witness testimony forms are not submitted in a timely manner, so just making sure they are completed and submitted on time. And quite often the examples haven't been dated correctly. So the examples have been dated when the witness has completed the recording form, so put the date of when they filled it out rather than when the work-based example occurred. So it's not the date that the form was filled out, it's when the examples occurred. And quite often when the witness testimony has been written, handwritten, what's happening is the handwriting is ineligible when it's been scanned in. So just make sure somebody can read it. So moving on to the PD, not so much here as far as areas of development is concerned, but essentially the PD not being pre-planned and scheduled properly is a key area, and that suitable arrangements haven't been organised if it's being conducted face-to-face. What we don't want is it being conducted in an area where people are likely to interrupt or put the apprentice off. So moving on finally now to generic recommendations, making sure then that actually there is a suitability check for the job role and the learner prior to starting endpoint assessment, and making sure that an appropriate skills scan is conducted. Making sure then that the learner does have an opportunity to generate evidence in all of the key areas really does start the learner off on the best foot. So the final showcase portfolios that are being submitted, making sure then that those go through the relevant quality assurance process, making sure that you are swapping over those portfolios for quality checks prior to being submitted. And obviously that the showcase portfolio itself is submitted now as either a written report of 3,500 words or as a recorded audio presentation. And if you do need further guidance on that, there is a webinar on our business skills qualifications page that you can, a pre-recorded webinar that I did that you can look at, listen back to in your own time. The evidence reference form is mandatory, so you've got to fill out the evidence reference form that we provide. It's found in the recording forms pack for centres. Please make sure that that's completed and mapped across to the evidence in the portfolio. And making sure then that the centres support the apprentice in selecting their best pieces of work. It's a holistic approach. We don't want to see lots and lots of pieces of evidence. It's less is more, unless the assessment plan says is plural in a particular area. We only generally want to see one, but let's say for instance conflicts and challenges, we need to clearly see at least two pieces of evidence there, different pieces, making sure that the consistency can deal with conflicts and challenge, not just on the odd occasion, not just on the one occasion. So apprentice showcases must include a technique of self-analysis, so examples of SWOT and a PDP. And evidence that is within that e-portfolio or linked to, say, an internal system is fully extracted. So if you do have evidence that's in stored on an internal system, it needs to be fully extracted, and making that easier for the endpoint assessor to actually look at that evidence in detail without having to get passwords or ask for it separately. We do have a showcase checklist which is available on the EPA preparation tool, so making sure that you refer to that. Failed showcases should resubmit only the failed criteria. This might be a selection of new evidence as well as existing evidence, but only submit the failed criteria again when you upload to the portal. The witness testimony witnesses should state the name, job title, position and relationship, like I mentioned before, because we are seeing occasionally that not all these key areas are being completed. And the specific work-based examples within that witness testimony and as to how the apprentice has met those skills and behaviours must be documented. Those witness testimony examples should be mapped across to the modules as well. If you're finding that they map across to more than one module, that's great, that's brilliant, because obviously it's going to save you time, and it's more using that more of a holistic approach. And the professional discussions should take place, like we mentioned previously, in that suitable environment. Making sure as well that mock PDs are conducted prior to the endpoint assessment taking place. Finally then, I just want to point out that there is a new endpoint assessment pack, I'm sure you're aware, came out in August 2020 and is now version 2.2. So if you haven't got 2.2, please discard the old customer service EPA pack and download the new version 2.2. It will give you full guidance as well, and there's quite a bit of supportive information there regarding the portfolio and the audio PowerPoint presentation should your learners wish to complete that method. Finally, I hope you're finding your standardisation session worthwhile, and hoping that this 10-minute slot does support you and helps you in the future. If you do have any questions, please email me, dominic.green@cityandguilds.com. I'll try and get back to you as soon as you can. Thank you for your time. Stay healthy, stay safe, and look after each other. Thank you.